Hello everyone. I'm really excited with an opportunity to talk about how we at Cybereason see the future of cybersecurity. Thank you all for joining us today. Today's agenda will include the reasons the artificial intelligence can be really helpful and is a mandatory requirement in cybersecurity today. Following that, I will show you an advanced attack simulation that usually spans into weeks and maybe months, condensed into a 20-minute demonstration. Then I will show you how Cybereason was able to pick up, enrich the context, alert, and provide you with remediation options, and why you might want to choose Cybereason as the partner in this unfair battle. I'd like to start this introduction with a minute of honesty. In the world we live in today, hackers are winning. On the other hand, it's obvious today that the world is becoming more and more digitalized. What this means is that the attack surface changes rapidly, and the threats are becoming more and more dangerous. If what the future holds for us is autonomous cars smashing at each other, smart cities shutting down at once, or identity theft happening at a time we will spend more than 50% of our time in virtual reality, these are really bad news. But let us be optimistic here. I think this doesn't mean we're all doomed to fail. On the contrary, I believe this means the defenders must win, and we will win. As more cyber threats have on modernization and technological innovations, the pressure to find a better solution increase. We already feel it today. Cybereason is a good example. We were only founded 7 years ago, and we're not the only unicorn in the industry. New cyber defense solutions are doing things differently. The most promising part of it is relying on artificial intelligence that can really change the asymmetry between attackers and defenders. Please allow me to spend the better half of my introduction on explaining what I mean. So the good news, we agree we will win. Now the question is how? To start answering this question, I would like to note one thing that I'm sure you all know, but is very important for me to point at. Attack operations are very long and complex. It is hard to operate an attack. It takes weeks and months. It requires skilled people, and attackers always live in the dark without the information they need. Even though attack operations are hard, what we found surprising is that the penetration phase is always successful. When we as defenders think of the different phases of an attack, we want to focus our efforts on preventing attackers from getting into our organizations. Because if the attacker cannot hack in, there is not much damage he can do. The problem is that penetration is inevitable. Our founders started their career in cybersecurity in the 8200 unit of the Israeli Defense Forces, where they served for 7 good years and led a technological team that was involved in cyber operations. In all the cyber operations they were involved in, they were able to get an initial hold on an asset in the internal network, 100% of the time. Sometimes it took a day, and other times it was a months-long process, but eventually they got in. Always. Given the complexity of cyber operation, and given the fact that we cannot completely prevent hackers from getting in, we the defenders need to choose between two options. Option number 1, we decide that infection is the biggest challenge and try to stop it completely. And option number 2 is to understand that penetration is inevitable and focus efforts in post-infection phases. Up until now, we chose the first. We put most of our investment on trying to prevent what we all believe is unpreventable. We're building walls that will never be able to fully protect us. And I'm not saying we shouldn't build those walls. We should. It's much safer with them. We just need to invest on finding someone that was able to go above or below the wall or was able to find the loose brick to get in. By the way, the reason we did not invest 100% on prevention is because it fails. When we fail, we are to spend money on post-damage activities to understand what damage we suffered from and what we need to do to restore our network. We, the defenders, need to remember we're here to protect our organizations. This is very important. Our goal is not to prevent, it is to protect. If I'm unable to prevent the infection from happening, but I can stop the attackers before they were able to grab a foothold on any asset, or if I'm able to quickly isolate the compromised assets and prevent the attackers from using them, I've done my job. This notion is important in order to start talking about our advantage as defenders. So how do we protect? To best answer this, we should ask the question differently. When does an attack fail? Remember I told you our founders were successful in penetrating 100% of their targets. What I didn't tell you then is that this number was a bit lower when you measured the number of successful operations. Not too low though, don't worry. But it is important to know that attacks do fail. So when does an attack fail? From our experience, in most cases, attacks fail when they face what we call the ultimate defender. And the ultimate defender is someone who understands attack operations, techniques, and tools, is capable of collecting and understanding the data, and is curious and determined. The last point is important. The ultimate defender is a person that will not go to sleep at night if he feels that something suspicious or just weird is going on. This type of people will not only do that because they're loyal to their employer, they'll do it because they like it. They like the thrill of it and they like the technological challenge that comes with it. If you ask these people what days were the best they had in their job, it will never be the day that went without any problem. It will always be the days when someone they never met was challenging them, playing a game they were not willing to lose. And how do we call all of this? We call it hunting. Well, in our world, it obviously looks more like this. Cyber defense hunting is about being proactive as a defender. When you do not wait for the attack to reveal itself to you, because once it does, it is already way too late for you to do something about it. Hunting is about asking questions, investigating what's not right, understanding what's going on. It's about collecting data and understanding it. It's about visualizing your network to control it. It's about investigating minor leads and never giving up. Hunting is our way to reverse the asymmetric problem of cybersecurity. When we follow a prevent everything strategy, what it means is that we, the defenders, must be successful 100% of the time, while the attacker needs succeeding only once. If we have prevention tools that are effective for 80% of attacks, or let's be optimistic and trust most vendors out there and say 99% of attacks, the attacker will try 10, 100, or 1,000 times and eventually they will get in. Moving to detect anything strategy means we can detect any part of the attack to protect our organization. Now the attacker needs to bypass all of our different detections all the time. While it is enough for us to succeed once, to reveal the threat and remediate it before any damage is done. By moving from prevent everything defense strategy to a detect anything strategy, we're changing the asymmetry in cybersecurity, giving the advantage to the defenders. Now that we know what we need to do and how to do it, the next step will be to recruit the right people for the job. But as we see in this article, and I'm sure you feel it better than any numbers I'll give you, we have a problem. The shortage in professional people to fill in the positions in our teams is crucial. There might be a specific company that is in a better position than another, but in general, as a sector, we have a huge gap in qualified people. And that's a global problem. This is a significant problem in the US and Europe, and it's even worse in Japan and the rest of Southeast Asia. Even in Israel, which is considered a cyber hub, we're lacking qualified people in many positions. The answer to manpower shortage, as it has always been, is technology. Our answer to it is what we call AI hunting. Using Cybereason AI technology, we have automated the process of cyber defense hunting. We're able to train a machine to be this ultimate defender. A machine can ask more questions, analyze more data, and get more accurate results. So we trained a machine to be the best security analyst in the world, just on steroids, with no need to sleep and no weekends or vacations. To be able to do that, we need the core of the technology, the AI engine. We need to build the algorithms, describe the models, and we need to properly train the AI engine for our models. I hope you found this quick intro interesting. Whether you did or you didn't, I would like you to remember 5 main things. Number 1, we are going to win. Number 2, to win, we cannot only talk about prevention. Number 3, we need to focus on protecting our organizations. Number 4, to do that, we need to see more, understand more, and stop more. And the last one, artificial intelligence technology is what will lead us to change the asymmetric problem of cybersecurity and have the advantage over the attackers. And now to the attack simulation itself. You are going to see a real-life attack in action and how to defend and gain the upper hand over that attack from our offense-first hunting perspective. We've simulated a company with a couple of users. An advanced attacker may use some sort of social engineering, and the attacker did some basic external reconnaissance using social media resources like Facebook and LinkedIn to find out who their targets are. Maria is the CEO of the organization, and Robert is her executive assistant. I'm going to target Robert's machine in the initial phase of the attack because as a semi-low level user, he probably has to deal with multiple senior leaders on a daily basis, including CEO and several CFOs. Robert is overloaded with inbound emails and calendar management tasks, which he complained about on his Facebook page. So he's very likely to open our phishing email. Ultimately, we want to get to Maria's CEO and steal some valuable data from her machine. Usually, this sort of a low and slow attack takes weeks and sometimes months. We've condensed what could have been low and slow attack down into few minutes. A lot of the tools and techniques that adversaries would use in a similar scenario are going to be demonstrated during our session today. So, let's dig in. Before I start, I would like to show you that there is a Cybereason console that is managing those 2 victim machines, the Robert and Maria. Once I log into the console, I see that there are no alerts and there are no things that the analysts need to worry about. Just before jumping into the actual simulation, I would like to show you the footprint of the sensors while they're in inactive state. Okay, I'm going to be using a Kali Linux distribution in order to perform all of my activity. Robert is my initial target, whom I'm trying to phish. Robert has a Firefox open, as every user would have, and he's browsing the website. Cybereason on his machine is set to detect only mode, because if we can detect, we can prevent this from happening, and I would not be successful to execute the entire attack that I wanted to show you. Robert has his email client open, which has been standardized across the organization, and he sees an email. It's a recruitment plan Excel spreadsheet that I, an attacker, have craftfully masqueraded. He sees an attachment and he opens it. I've done everything I could to make him click on enable editing and then enable content. Let's assume Robert recently had a phishing email training and he sees there is another tab which may actually provide him with answers he was looking at. When he clicks on the second tab, he sees his name, names of his colleagues that I was able to extract from LinkedIn using a paid-for service. And he sees that in order for him to know who is going to replace him when he will get fired, he needs to enable the content. In most cases, end users will simply click enable the content, even without me being so craftful. He enables the content, and what is happening on the background is the stager. The stager executes a domain generation algorithm that looks for the way out and establishes a command and control. It also uses a script in a text file, so the macro will initiate a couple of programs that run on a machine to download the exploit in a text format with a built-in process in the Windows operating system, and then it will execute it with another process which is a part of the operating system. And as you can see here in my Meterpreter session, I have a session open from my Kali Linux box into hopefully Robert's machine. Let me connect to this session first and let me find out who the user is. For that, I will use a simple command, get UID. I've landed on one of the targeted machines and I can proceed with my operation. But before I do that, I wanted to tell you something. Currently, my command and control is running from the process called csscript.txt, which I use to execute exploit.txt file. If customers' security maturity is pretty high, then they will be able to spot my activity. And as you remember, I wanted to make sure that this operation stays low and slow. So first thing I will need to do is to move away from the CS script into a more legitimate process that is well known to create remote connections. Before I do that, I need to understand what are different processes currently running on Robert's machine. In order to do that, I will run a simple command, ps. Looking at the list of all processes running on Robert's machine, I notice one that is well known to make remote connections, and it's Firefox. I will filter my search results by the keyword fire to find out what is the most prevalent child ID, which means this is the parent ID I can migrate my operation into using a built-in floating code injection capability of the Meterpreter. I will say migrate 2868. This is the flakiest part of my presentation because Meterpreter session is not always stable, so I hope it works. And it did. Now I'm running my operation from Firefox. The next step I want to figure out is whether I'm in the right network segment, whether Robert is in the same network segment with my final target, Maria Ross. For that, I will use a simple command, netview. I have prescripted all of my scripts into RC files, so I type less and I explain more. I called it netbias scan, and as you can see, I'm using netview command to sniff around, which is a built-in capability of Windows, again utilizing living of the land technique and not introducing any new processes or files. So I am very low and slow, and I'm very hard to detect with signature-based solutions. Now that I know that I'm on the right machine and I'm in the right network segment and I have moved my operation into the Firefox, the next step is to find the way onto Maria's machine. For that, I chose to use pass the hash technique. In order to use pass the hash technique, I will have to have a hash of an administrator in order to have this user compromised and to move laterally. As I'm running from Robert's user privileges, those privileges are not enough to dump the hashes from the machine, which I hope will include administrator password hash. Before I can actually dump the hashes, it means that I need to escalate my privileges in order to gain higher privilege in order to perform the rest of my attack. Before I do that, I need to understand what is the patch level of Robert's machine. There is a simple command that I can use in order to do that. It's called sysinfo. It will tell me the machine I'm on, but most importantly, what is the operating system, version, and patch level. I know that in this specific machine patch level, there is a pop-up tracker menu vulnerability, MS1458. By attaching myself into this pop-up tracker menu, which runs at system all the time, I should gain system privileges. So I will background this session and I will execute my script, privesc.rc. As you can see, I'm using the vulnerability available to me in the same interpreter session. I'm using the same reverse HTTP back to my Linux box. I set the port and I click to run it. Now, by the rule of everything, I should be running as a system. And I will use the same command I used in the first place to identify the user. Get UID. And bingo, I'm running as a system. Now I have enough privileges to continue with my malicious operation. Before I move laterally and before I dump hashes for the lateral move, I would want to perform certain steps in order to hide my presence and to keep my operation even lower and slower. First thing I want to do is I want to create a persistence. So I'll add a user called ghost, with the password cyber. Again, I used net command, only with the different parameters this time. Net user ghost cyber add. Second thing I'm going to do is I want to make sure that every next step in this organization will look like it originates from Robert machine, so it doesn't expose my IP at least twice. There is an auto-root capability in the interpreter session that I'm going to use. Auto-root RC. What it means that all traffic in this network segment is going to be looking like it's coming from Robert's machine 103. So when I move laterally onto Maria's machine, the source IP is going to be Robert and not my Kali Linux box 108. Now I'm ready to dump the hashes. Resource hash dump. So I'm using a built-in dumper. As you can see, the post hash gatherer. You can see I've got my administrator hash, and you can also see that the user I've added is also available. I'm ready to perform the lateral move. I'll background the session and I will execute the resource, pass the hash with the hash embedded into the code. And as you can see, I'm using same technique with the stager regis VR with the same scriptlet, and I'm trying to load the payload. It should establish a connection on my listener, and it does on another IP address, and it uses the same techniques I've used to establish command and control on Robert's machine. As you can see, the exploit completed, but no session was created, is because the DGA is still running. Now I can see that session 3 was opened, and I should now be on Maria's machine. How do I check that? I could run get UID, but I'm hoping that I will retain system privileges. And I did. So there is a second command that I can use in order to understand the name of the machine, and it's Maria Ross. I'm not here to teach you how exfiltrate the data from machines or how to perform any kind of other damage. What I want to show you now is how do I hide my steps? How do I make sure that everything that I did is destroyed? The easiest way to do that is to encrypt the machine, because in most cases IT operations will choose to simply reimage it, helping me keeping my presence at a minimum. I'm going to use a fileless ransomware called PowerWare that doesn't introduce any executables on your machine, but starts encryption from the PowerShell itself. The only prevention capability that I've enabled on the policy was the ransomware suspend capability. So instead of actually blocking, preventing, and destroying the connection, showing that the defender is after me, I will suspend the process and it will look like the process is still happening, but there might be a problem somewhere else. On Maria's machine, we see that there was a detection and Maria was notified that there was a fileless ransomware attempt, which was detected and suspended in real time. Now I will pivot back into the UI and I will refresh the UI to see everything that has happened and what the defender would see in the case of such an operation. First thing you note when you log into the UI that each and every alert is grouped by the cyber kill chain activity type, which allows you to easily understand how successful the operation is and how far the bad guys are in their cyber operation cycle. You can see that Cybereason doesn't dedicate a lot of space for malware alerts, but I will show you what those are. You can see that the macro I've used in the document is a known downloader, and it would be blocked, and my attack wouldn't have succeeded if prevention was enabled. But the attacker in any other case would use a more sophisticated macro to bypass this kind of detection. Then we see that there were some malicious commands detected on Maria's machine, and we can actually go and investigate, which demonstrate the connection between the next generation AV, fileless anti-malware, and the EDR engine. We see that for just this detection of a PowerShell code, which is a command, we also see all the classification that the Cybereason tool provides. Other tools will alert you on each of those occasions. In our case, it's a one single malop alert of a command and control establishment on Maria's machine. You can see the amount of detail provided to the analyst so that he can quickly decide whether to prevent this activity or set a custom reputation. If we go back into the discovery board, we will note how many alerts have happened. We will see that the bubbles have different size and they may also have different color. The size of the bubble demonstrates the graph capability to see all alerts and all techniques across all machines at the same time, without the need for explicit grouping or similar algorithms. It's the power of graph that allows us to understand whether the same technique was used on multiple machines and to connect those dots for you automatically. An analyst would usually spend their day in the malop inbox. That conveniently places new alerts at the top of the list. There are two timestamps actually. One is when the alert was created, and you can see the sequence of the entire operation. The phishing email, the stager, credential theft, me moving into the Firefox process, elevated privileges, dumping the hashes, using pass the hash technique to move laterally, establishing command and control via fileless, and then filelessly encrypting Maria's machine. And you can see a little suspense sign here. You can also see another timestamp here, which is a last activity. As some techniques were used on multiple machines, if I sort by last activity, I will see what were the last activities executed in my environment. You can also see that already here in the malop inbox, an analyst is provided with the root cause of an attack, with a scope, with detected activity, and it can also implement certain labels. There are predefined labels for you, or you create your own custom. Okay. If when you're done remediating the specific alert, you can remove it. So let me do this for a couple of alerts. For example, those CMD ones. And the PowerShell script. And when I mark them as remediated, they disappear from the UI, both from the malloc inbox and from the discovery board. You can see there are now 10 active mallocs for us to work on. When an analyst first sees the attack, he probably takes the phishing alert in the first place. Here you can see that the malloc is graphically representing what has happened in real life. It gives you the root cause, the scope of an attack, the malicious process, any associated network connections if there were any, an English language description with MITRE attack detection technique mapping, and most importantly, what takes end users days and sometimes weeks to build, analysts, is the timeline. If we pivot this malloc into the process perspective, we will see the actual execution and the reason why Cybereason detected this activity. Robert had an Outlook open, then he opened an attachment, which then loaded a couple of living of the land techniques, which created 99 unresolved queries. Unresolved queries are normal in every environment. Every time we browse, we will have unresolved queries. But in this context, Cybereason was able to identify that that's a command and control establishment during phishing attack. The malicious process itself should not be quarantined, and registry keys of that process should not be touched because it's assigned and verified. It's a part of the operating system. So what Robert would do, what an analyst would do in the first place, he would probably want to disable internet connection for Robert's machine. As you can see, the internet connection is currently open and it's working fine. If I click isolate, I will isolate that machine immediately. If there were multiple machines involved, all the machines in scope would be isolated with one single click. This is how quickly I can start my remediation, or at least a containment of malicious activity. Let's test it. Unfortunately, there is a problem. Let's test it with a ping. And it's a general failure there. Now, although Robert doesn't have internet access and no one can move laterally from his machine, we still have access to our console. And we can use guided remediation options by Cybereason that doesn't allow analysts make any mistakes. And here you can see that the options provided to us in this case is to kill the active process. Let's come back here and let's make sure that we still do have the Excel. Please remember, this is the Excel. And now I will execute the reaction. So remediation action sent. We can see the entire response history. We can see who was the user who did that and what were the actions. So we've isolated the machine and we killed the process. If we go back into Robert's machine, the Excel process is gone immediately. Now let's assume that I'm done with my responses and I want to stop isolating Robert's machine. And again, I can do it pretty much instantly. If I try to look for Monaco one more time, it resolves no problem. And the ping should pass through easily. So just few clicks away, I was able to remediate Robert's machine and to bring it back to production state without damaging or destroying anything important running on his machine. If that automation is not enough, you can always initiate a remote shell capability. Cybereason provides with secure remote shell with guided remediation steps that will also try and attempt not to allow you destroying files by hashes if it's a part of the operating system. If you want to be more proactive and you want to look further into the detail of each and every malware, you can do that with Cybereason investigations. But first, let's get acquainted with a couple of interesting malware that we see. One of them is the floating code injection using meterpreter migrate command from the CS script, as I told you, onto Robert's machine, Firefox process. Let's look at this from a processes perspective. And what's the code? It's a floating code injection. Let us go back and look at another interesting one, maybe net. Again, root cause, scope, malicious processes, timeline, suspicions, and we've got a couple of commands here. We have our persistence command and we have our reconnaissance command, all available in single malware, all grouped for you for convenience and without the need for you to stitch those stories together. Let's go into the stager itself, the regsvr. Let's see what the stager is about. And it happened on 2 machines. So here you can see a malware grouping. The scope is 2 machines. If we click on a malicious process, we can filter out on which specific execution we're interested in by simply choosing them. But you can see that the command line was the same. If we want to dive deeper and look at the network connections associated to the Kali Linux box, for example, look at all machines involved in this and all connections associated, or the users that took part in this. We can also dive deeper and investigate on what has happened from a stager perspective. And we can see that regsvr, it launched CS script. We can see in investigations much more information, including the execution of the txt file using CS script. And then it making a connection to my Linux box, my Kali box, my command and control. And then it sees certain evidences and suspicions. And then the migration associated to this specific process, because I moved away from CS script into Firefox. And this is when I vended the CS script. I have all timestamps and I know exactly when that happened. I can navigate and further investigate on all of the pieces of evidence associated to this one single process and all the suspicions collected by the tool. Again, the command line, the file information. I can download the executable if I want. I can see the execution, WMI activity, if any, connections associated. And I can already decide what I'm going to do. To further visualize this for the defender, Cybereason provides with an attack tree capability that shows the full sequence of malicious execution in Robert's environment. So you can see that Robert had a Firefox open, and by the way, each of those elements is a query. And please appreciate the speed that the tool is using in order to execute the query. He had Outlook open. He then opened an attachment that has certain classifications already. And I can tell you what was the malicious attachment. It was the recruitment plan. And I can actually download it for further analysis of the macros used, so I can enable my tool to be more robust next time. Cybereason provides you with custom detection rules creation engine, so you can teach your solution to become more and more robust with every day. Once you see a technique that may not have been detected by Cybereason, you can build a logical equation or a logical algorithm saying what exactly that you want this to be triggered on. And then you apply variable filters on each of those elements. So in the attack tree itself, we see the stager. We see the bits admin. That was another living of the land technique I used in order to download the txt file. Then the CS script itself to execute. And then I moved away using the floating code injection. All of these pieces of evidence and suspicions would be single alerts for most of the products out there. I can see my net view command. I can see my net user command as well. I see everything that the bad guy did in this environment, and I can take very well weighted decisions in order to remediate and teach my prevention going forward. All of that is automatically created for the Defender by Cybereason platform. The last thing that I wanted to show you is the query capability. Cybereason uses syntax-free capability in order to perform queries using element, filter, and pivot approach. If I wanted to find all machines with users who are making remote connections, this is how my query would look like and get results. I can now see all of those users who made remote connections. I can see all of the machines, which means that I can pivot into any part of my query. Now I want to filter results of that query, and I want the Cybereason tool to tell me what were the processes and who were the users talking to Google. I implement a filter by domain name, and I'll specify Google to be contained. Now it should shrink the scope into much less processes, and you would say that those are the processes talking to Google domain. I'm currently recording this with Camtasia Studio, and of course it does use my DNS 8.8.8.8 to get out for updates. This is why you see it here. You can also see all the users. It makes sense. This is me, myself on my machine. Okay. And you can pivot and filter on each and every part of that query if you like. I wasn't even talking about classifications like has suspicions, mallops, children, blacklisted, prevented. There is a whole bunch of different filters provided to you for each and every different element, including different classifications and including the MITRE mapped ones. The analyst in Cybereason doesn't need to create his own detections, collections, triggers, whatever. All of that is provided to you out of the box. Let's build a simple phishing query, something that is very hard to build in CM systems. The phishing always starts with an email client, and as you remember, I told you that we have standardized Outlook in this environment. I can get results of each and every part of the query, but for now, I will continue building it. For this to have an attachment in an email client, there has to be a child process launched by Outlook. The child process, for it to be an actual attachment that takes part in the phishing attack, should have a specific product type, which I'm going to apply filter on. It could be an Adobe PDF document, it could be a link to a browser, or a Microsoft Office document like in our case with a macro. I can already click get results, but there is no value for me because I know it's going to be Excel. Now for this to become a phishing attack, this attachment needs to run another child process. And in my case, I'll apply further product type filters. And in most cases, it's a shell process. In my scenario, I have used a not specific OS process, regsvr, and I should be able to find it using this query. I can see the command line in results, and there is much more in the columns that I can add, because not everything has been added into this. Depends on what the analyst actually cares about. All of the results of the query can be exported either manually or automatically via API. So once you save the query, you can actually request this query to be executed next time and the results being pulled out via API. If I want to know what was the common and control IP address in this phishing attack, I can enrich this query by just using 2 clicks, connections and remote address. And if you remember, my Kali Linux box IP address was 108. That's exactly what it is. Now I will set the reputation to blacklist this IP in the Cybereason environment, and if it's integrated with SIEM or SOAR platforms that can automate indicators of compromise sharing, then probably your SOAR would send a BL command onto your firewall to blacklist it on the perimeter. That way you can even further automate the capability of your cyber posture. This ends the UI demonstration of Cybereason, and I wanted to recap what we just saw. So we saw a phishing attack to get in. I've established a command and control connection via domain generation algorithm, and then I executed fileless malware via PowerShell. Second, I used the process injection method to evade detection. I've migrated my attack code and I hidden my operation inside of a browser. Then I moved laterally to gain access to the high-value data. For that, I had to escalate privileges to steal credential hashes, and then I moved laterally by leveraging a legitimate remote execution tool. And the last step was to cover my tracks by wiping victim's drive, and I used fileless ransomware launched via PowerShell. So what is the problem today then, especially when those fileless malware and leaving of the land techniques are used in most of the successful attacks these days? The problem is to understand that you're under attack. The problem is that there is too many things happening legitimately in your environment, so you are able to easily alert on something. And even if you get an alert after a couple of months, you still need to use multiple tools, and you need to have smart people with scripting knowledge capabilities in order to triage, understand the scope, investigate, find all the tools, techniques used, so then you can command certain people to remediate. And then again, it takes time and it takes people. And usually it is too late. The problem with that is, no matter what prevention you've got, you will get penetrated. And from infection to alert, from alert to response, and then to complete remediation, there is just too much data. It is the big data problem. How do we get from data to wisdom? Blacklisting gives us information. Is it good or bad? CM systems, when they are properly configured and they have very good and quality data sources, they might probably stick those facts together, from proxy logs to firewall logs to maybe DLP logs and the rest. Some better EDR tools today will help you prioritize those alerts and actually pinpoint what is most important for the analyst to take care of first. There are very few tools on the market today that can tell you full story of the attack and provide you with a ready-to-act package. So how do we get from one single alert somewhere in your environment to understanding the entire cyber kill chain? How do we get all of those IOCs associated, teach our prevention for the future, especially when we're talking about attacks that have started 200 days ago and maybe even earlier? So the answer to this problem is the dynamic data model. Legacy tools that are built around FLAY data model and relational databases simply cannot do what can be done. They cannot perform cross-machine correlation. They cannot do it fast enough and efficient enough from both storage and operational perspective. With dynamic data model, especially when the graph database designed by Cybereason, which is by the way proprietary and patented, when it's stored in memory, it doesn't depend on the IOPS of the storage. The data is automatically enriched with threat intelligence and pre-correlated for you. All the analyst needs to do is to ask the right questions in real time, utilizing syntax-free query language, which you just saw in the demonstration. Cybereason platform consists of three main elements. Number one is the sensor. It is unique. It gathers unique amount of data, about 400 metrics from each machine. Windows, Linux, Mac, VDI, containers, soon to be mobile. Whatever happens on the prevention layer, utilizing signature-based AV, next generation AV with behavioral analytics, fileless malware detection, .NET detection, and anti-ransomware utilizing deception techniques. It will always collect the raw data, those 400 metrics from each and every endpoint, and it will dump them into the in-memory graph database, which we call a cross-machine correlation engine. It will automatically pre-correlate everything to everything, so we already know who was the user, which privileges, he launched the process, made a network connection, edited registry keys, and so on. Then we need a UI, a one single UI that can manage prevention, that can report on detection, that can provide you with hunting and remediation capabilities, all in one console, with one single agent doing it all. Cybereason deliverable is the high-fidelity alert called the MALOP, which is fully automated and doesn't require configuration, although allows you to create custom detection rules so you can teach this solution about your specific environment. And after you teach it, you enable automated prevention in the future. If all of that automation and proactive hunting are not enough, you can use rich APIs to integrate with SOAR and SIM platforms. Cybereason integrates out of the box using native applications with Curator, Splunk, and Demisto, and few others. We also provide you with different types of services to monitor, to hunt, to respond, and provide you with long-term storage for those cases where you need to have raw data access for more than 7 days. You can also see from this slide that the efficiency that we get in our SOC is equals 150,000 endpoints per analyst. So what does it mean? It means that the dwell time is almost completely reduced with near real-time automated alerting. Then with a syntax-free UI and a very easy to navigate MALOP alerts that graphically represent what happens, an analyst can start their investigation and containment from the same single UI, thus shortening mean time to detect and mean time to respond to the point before the material damage, before you need to press the red button. So what usually takes several analysts several hours to complete in multiple tools, the exact same investigation in Cybereason takes one analyst a few minutes. And please don't take my words for granted. We have participated in many independent reviews and we will continue doing so. One we really are proud of is the Maitre. If you would like to speak to us about anything that you saw today or anything that you feel Cybereason can help you with, please feel free to reach out to us. And we're going to be more than happy to discuss our next strategic step. Thank you everyone for your attention, and now we're going to be open for questions. Goodbye.